Welcome! In the last lecture, we successfully added nodes for us to handle the rotation of the second directional light, our moon. Now, if we increase our time of day, our sun would disappear and our moon would come out. Currently, we have one issue, and that is we no longer have our sky atmosphere. And in order to get it back, we'll need to handle the visibility of the two directional lights. And I think this is a perfect opportunity to introduce blueprint macros. So this is what blueprint macro looks like in Unreal. Fundamentally, this is just a collapsed graph of nodes. And once the blueprint that uses this macro is compiled, all the nodes inside of this macro will be pasted into the graph. So this is very similar as a C++ macro. And if you have used the blueprint before, a blueprint macro is actually something that you've used over and over again. So I'm sure you've used the node is valid or the node for each loop. And there are many more of these that are shipped with Unreal, and they all belong to the standard macro library. Essentially, they are just a bunch of nodes, and if you double click to open any one of them, you will see these are the nodes inside. One interesting thing here is, because this is how for loop is built inside the blueprint, and you can see there are many nodes inside of it. And for this reason, a blueprint for loop is always going to be slower than the C++ for loop. It's also recommended by Epic that we move our expensive loops into C++ and not inside the blueprint for performance reasons. Now you're probably wondering, when should I use a blueprint macro and when should I use a blueprint function? Since they both have execution pins and they look very similar. And to answer that question, let's make a little comparison in here. So we're going to compare function, macro, and event. In this course, we don't need to use event, but I think it'll make a good comparison in here. So first thing, we're going to take a look, can they return a value? So a function can return a value, a macro can return a value as well, but an event can't. Very often that we need to process something, then produce a result, and we can either use function or macro to do that. And the next thing, can they be called outside of the class? So a function can be called outside of the class, but a macro can't. And that's because this is just a bunch of nodes copy and pasted. It doesn't exist outside of the class, so we cannot call it. And also an event can be called outside of the class. And the third one, can we use timeline or delay? So we cannot use timeline or delay inside of a function or a macro. We can only use it inside of an event. And when working inside of construction script, we can only use function and macro and not event. Besides these things listed, there are also many other things. For example, stuff like delegates or network replication. And that's a topic we won't get into in this course. And besides all of this, there's one powerful thing that a blueprint macro has. We can have multiple execution pins inside of it. And this is coming really handy when we need to add in weathers to our sky system. Because we simply need to know what's the current weather, and we can act based on it, adjust the lighting settings, activate or deactivate particle systems. We'll get to this part later in the course. Now, to examine what we've just learned, I got a mini challenge for you. I'm gonna show you some things that I need to do, but I'm not quite sure which one I need to use. So, is it a blueprint function, a macro, or an event? First one, I need to use delay. Second one, I need to have multiple execution pins. Third one, I need to call it from another class. And the last one, I need to return a value. Remember, some of them may have multiple answers. Pause the video now and see if you can come up with some answers for these questions. Welcome back. You can find answers to these questions under the Q&A section of this lecture. I'm not going to go over them again as I went over them just now. So check out the answers if you need. Alright, now that you know what a blueprint macro is, I like to use it to control the visibility of our directional lights. So I'm going to go back to my blueprint graph. And to create a macro, we can come to here and click this add button to add a new one. So for this new macro, I'm going to call it is daytime. Then I'm going to hold down Control, then drag out this time of day. So I want this macro to tell us if we are currently inside of daytime. So first, I'm going to check if this time of day is greater than this dawn time. So hold down Control, drag it out. And I'm going to subtract 0.3 from it. So as long as this value is greater than dawn time subtract 0.3, and so use an AND boolean in here, this daytime is less than this dusk time plus 0.3. So if this condition is true, then I'm going to say this is daytime. And I'm going to drag out this pin and connect it to outputs. So this macro that we just created, it won't have any execution pins. Only one boolean that tells us true or false. And we have a macro for its daytime. I'm going to create a new one. And I'm going to call it is nighttime. So I'm going to drag out this macro is daytime and use a not boolean. So if we are currently not inside of daytime, then this is obviously the nighttime. Alright, I'm going to click compile and I'm going to go back to my construction script. Then I'm going to create a new function. So for this function, I'm going to call it handle visibility and place it inside of this basic settings category. Then I'm going to drag out this sun directional light and drag out this pin. There's a function inside, it's called set visibility. So when should this sun be visible? And I'm going to drag out this is daytime. So if it's inside of daytime, it should be visible. If it's not, it should be invisible. And connect this pin to here. And same thing goes for this moon directional light. So drag it out. I'm going to select this set visibility, press Ctrl+D to duplicate it. Connect this pin to here. And drag out this macro is nighttime. And connect this one to this new visibility. And connect this pin to here. And I'm going to click compile. Now go back to my construction script. I'm going to add a pin in here and drag out this function. Connect it to here. And now we should be able to have our sky hemisphere back. I'm going to click compile and go back to my level. I'm going to start to adjust this time of day. So when this value is approaching our dusk time, and you can see our sun goes down, and after that, you can see we have our moon comes out. And when it gets to the midnight, our moon is at the highest point on the sky. And we have our sky back, that's great. And if I lower this value to be before the dawn, and you can see there's our moon. And if I keep increasing it, then our sun comes out. Everything is working properly. So this is the is daytime macro that I created. The logic here is the same as how we are handling the sun-moon rotation. And once we know when it's daytime, we can simply flip this condition to tell us if this is nighttime. And after we've done that, we can use these two macros to set the visibility of our sun and moon. And lastly, don't forget to call your function inside of your construction script. Feel free to use this as a reference if you need. And it's time for you to implement this by yourself. And I'll see you in the next lecture.